Okay, well, we have about 900 people still on the call here, and we have probably maybe 300 questions. So I'm going to try to get to everyone's question, but some questions are more particular than others. Some users here are more advanced. Some users are more beginners. So I'm trying to find questions that relate to as many people as possible.
Yeah, or maybe give me some tough ones and some easy ones. I don't.
Yeah, we'll do a mix. We'll do a mix here.
Yeah.
Let's start with an easy one though, and this is from Victor. He just asked, "What is a dimensional fund?" Maybe you want to make a little plug for Dimensional.
Dimensional Fund is a company that was set up by economists to invest in basically index funds, but in a somewhat more, let's say, savvy manner. And they're a pretty big company at this point. They have a lot of assets under management, and a certain set of advisors have hooked up with Dimensional, and they became Dimensional advisors, and they market. If you're connected with one of those Dimensional Fund advisors, you can invest in Dimensional funds and those mutual funds. But also, Dimensional funds just recently started out marketing exchange traded funds on the market. So really today anybody can purchase their exchange traded funds through their retirement accounts or through their regular assets. So we've had some exchange with because we're economists and they're economists. We've been showing them our software a little bit, and we've had some of our financial planners who use our software are Dimensional Fund advisors. So for a long time now, we've been just added Dimensional Fund assets as some of the assets that we have and that you can choose among in terms of setting up your investment strategies.
Many people have asked whether the results in terms of the trajectories, the numbers per year, are those all in today's dollars?
Everything in our software is in today's dollars. We never want to confuse anybody about inflation. In 30 years, a hot dog will probably cost $500. So we don't want to show somebody's living standard to be, $10 million or something when it's actually $30,000 in today's dollars. So everything is in today's dollars.
A lot of people have also asked, why specifically do you do 500 iterations of the Monte Carlo engine? Why not just 1,000 or 10,000? Is there some reasoning behind that?
Well, we try and we want to make the program sufficiently accurate. We found that the 500 is making these numbers each time you run it come out to be a little bit different because we are always randomly drawing each time you run the program from scratch, but they're not that much different. So it seems like a sweet spot in terms of enough Monte Carlo simulations to get to an accurate picture. Now, advisors do have the option to run more Monte Carlo simulations, and I think we may be providing that to other users as well. I think we probably will do that so that under settings and assumptions, you can probably specify running the program with more Monte Carlo simulations of trajectories. If we don't have that in there now, I think I will push our Chief Technology Officer to do that so that everybody can run as many as they'd like. Although
okay,
thousands,
so this is a question.
Yeah, and we can't do hundreds of thousands, but there'll be some limit because we can't type. We don't want to crash Google in the process of all this. Go ahead.
So if you go to the chart showing the different trajectories,
actually,
several people are
not Google, Amazon, because we're using Amazon website.
Correct. Amazon. Yeah, we're using Amazon. Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
So on the chart showing the different trajectories,
Okay.
a lot of people are asking, is this per person in the family, or is this the?
Yeah, it's if you look right over here, it says per adult living standard. So it's per person, but we're making a couple adjustments. One is for economies and shared living, and one is for the relative cost of kids. So it is really, it's kind of the idea to think about this is if you were a single adult, what would your living standard be? And it would be, you know, if you're living by yourself, it's like getting to spend on a discretionary basis. You know, if we're looking at the risky strategy in this case, it's like $43,000 here. That's a way to kind of think about this as a we've normalized things, we've adjusted things, so you can think about this as the living standard of a single adult person.
Right. This is a question from Samuel. Can Maxify handle so-called alternative investments that are neither stocks nor bonds? Some people have been asking about real estate.
Yeah, I just want to modify what I just said. This is per person, the average across everybody in the household, but you know, it does still, a way to think about that, the average in the household is to think about, well, if somebody were an adult living by themselves, this would be, and they didn't have any economies of shared living or children who are cheaper. This is the kind of living standard they would, that number would really reference their consumption as a single adult, but it is it is the average across household members. But back to alternative investments like real estate, you may have some special investments or you may have some special securities. As long as you have a return history that has at least 10 years of asset returns, you can enter those under assets, and we will, and then they'll show up in your list of assets, and you can make investment strategies using your own securities once you've entered a history of asset returns.
Right. Similar to all of these numbers being in today's dollars, people are asking whether the results here are after taxes. And
yeah, these are all.
Yeah.
This is what you get to spend. This is your spending money. This is after you paid all your taxes. So every trajectory, that's a very good question. Every trajectory is calculating, and every year when these people are in 2020, what their whole path of taxes are going to be every year in the future, and Social Security benefits, Medicare Part B premiums, and now we move them ahead to 2021, calculate from scratch the entire future for them, move them to 2022 after we take the draw of their returns. Same thing, brand new calculation, the entire path of taxes, benefits. So it's really being done very, very carefully. And leaving out taxes, you know, if you do really well in the market and we don't take into account the fact that you're going to have to pay higher taxes, we're not going to get your living standard straight. Yeah, your living standards should be higher, but it's not going to be as high as it would be if your taxes, you know, given that your taxes are going to go up, right?
Right. So when you're, this is a question from Martin. He asks, what does assuming a 3% for sure real return mean? Well, why would there be any variation in outcomes if the return is set at 3%?
Well, if you're spending, you know, if you're spending as if I'm going to, let's take the extreme. Suppose you spend as if you're going to earn 20% for sure for the rest of your life. Well, then you would spend a whole lot this year, which means, and of course, you know, that's not going to happen. You're not going to earn 20% for sure or on average. So the next year you would have a whole lot less in assets because you've spent so much this year. So that's going to start tipping this cone of outcomes downward. So that's what I was trying to say, that how aggressively you spend. If you spend more aggressively, it's going to tilt the cone of outcomes downward, whereas if you spend more cautiously, it will tilt it upwards. You think that is answering the question, Alex?
I think so. Yeah. Maybe let's see. Oh, this is a good question from Edmund. Is investment portfolio composition customizable to particular holdings? For example, Apple stock and Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund, or generic just stocks?
Is it customizable for, yes, if we're talking about like a Vanguard fund, there'd be a history of returns that Vanguard would have presumably on its website, or you can ask the Vanguard folks to send the history of returns. You just plug that in, you enter a new asset, and there you go. Like it could be the Fidelity Freedom Fund has probably a 30-year history of returns. You can set that up and bingo, make a portfolio that includes the Fidelity Freedom Fund, or maybe the Magellan Fund, whatever. The Windsor Fund from Vanguard, yeah.
How does this is a question from Patrick. How does this compare to a simple strategy of using the 4% rule or 3% withdrawal rate?
Well, that's a good question, Patrick. Let me just tell you really quickly how conventional financial planning does its investment risk analysis. What they do is they ask you how much you're currently saving. Then they ask you how much you want to spend in retirement. My answer to that question is $20 billion a day, but I'll set that answer aside. Anyway, you set some target. And what they do is they assume that the saving you're doing right now, you're going to maintain to the penny right now between now and retirement. They don't ask whether or not that's the right amount of saving to be doing right now. They just take that as given. Then they take your target for spending in retirement as given, and then they take draws on your asset. They ask you what you're holding in assets, and they accumulate up your saving by taking random returns, draws on your assets, and then they accumulate your saving after you hit retirement and start spending your targeted amount, and then they see if you run out of money. Now, what they're doing is really simulating in their Monte Carlo 3 huge mistakes. One is saving the wrong amount, the wrong constant amount every year, and it should be time varying, not constant, before retirement. They're simulating you're spending the wrong amount because surely you're going to pick the wrong target. It's impossible to choose the right spending target on your own after retirement, and never changing that no matter what happens, whether the market goes. And that's the third mistake, which is that your spending after retirement is never going to be adjusted no matter whether the market goes to zero or goes sky high. So, and then they see what the probability of making those 3 mistakes, whether that leads to failure. I'm not sure as an economist I don't see that it has any connection whatsoever to economic theory, to the life cycle model, to consumption smoothing. It's a method that was developed in the 50s and 60s because economists didn't have a method. We had our theory, but we didn't have any way to actually deliver it because we didn't have the computers or the software algorithms. So in the absence of that, the financial industry did the best it could, and they came up with this traditional methodology, which they're still using. And I'm not sure that it's telling us how it connects at all to what we're doing here. Now, I want to say that our software, when you run our Monte Carlo to see that your living standard, it can also fail, because if you tell the program that you have a lot of off-the-top fixed expenses, like very large tuition payments for the kids and high mortgage, and you're investing in a very aggressive way, well, there may be scenarios in which sequences of returns where you do very poorly and you can't meet those fixed expenses. And then the program will come back and say, sorry, your plan has failed. And then what you want to do is go back and adjust those fixed expenses or adjust how aggressively you're investing or spending or both, because you have a plan here that really has some chance of absolutely failing because you can't meet the fixed requirements. But apart from that commonality that we also have, cases where plans can fail, there's not really any similarity. We're not putting, basing this on people saving the wrong amount, spending the wrong amount when they're young, saving and spending the wrong amount when they're old, and then never adjusting. We're not doing any three of those mistakes in what we're doing.
This is a question from William, and I think it's a good question. Since we talked at the beginning of this presentation about the ultimate goal of trying to smooth your living standard as much as possible, what is the interpretation of this changing living, or these different changing living standards over time, when the goal is to smooth or have a level set of living standards over time?
Well, you're always cognizant as you get a high return or a low return. You're cognizant of the fact that you have many periods in the future. So you're spending, taking account that, hey, you've got the whole future that you have to cover. And so you're not spending everything you've got. So in that sense, the simulations are embedding ongoing consumption smoothing and planning for the future. But the fact that, you're kind of, when you're playing the market, you're going to the casino. So this is consumption smoothing, if you like, subject to your going to the casino. And I don't want to say that the stock market, although these days it feels like more like a casino in terms of the ups and downs, but the stock market is kind of a loaded in your favor casino, because on average it pays you a positive return, a quite good one, but it can also hurt you very badly, especially if you there are periods that where the market, as I said, went down 86% in the early 30s. It took about 15 years to get back to where it was in 1929. So if you are, you do have an option of investing just in inflation index bonds. You could, in that context, really insulate your entire trajectory of your future living standard and not have to worry about the downside or the upside. You wouldn't get the upside either if you did that. But but otherwise, you're going to take risk. We have to show you what it means.
This is a question from Jennifer. Is the living standard trajectory based on a systematic withdrawal strategy, or is the math based on matching the living standard to the calculated return based on a randomized total return calculation? Can you just provide a short overview of the math behind the iteration, please?
Okay, well, the withdrawal strategy, when we run these simulations, is given. It's the one you set up. So if we go back to the couple here, we specified under settings and assumptions that they're going to start withdrawing their retirement account money. Let's see, where do we put that? I guess that's under retirement accounts right here. Special withdrawals. Maybe it's back over the other place. Sorry. I'm missing where we specify the age at which you start your withdrawals. Let's see.
Well, while you look for that, I'm just going to answer a quick question.
I'm clicking on the wrong thing. I was clicking that. Here it is, right here. At 65, we specified that this household is going to start their withdrawals when they're 65. in the case of Martha, in the case of Sam, also 65. So the results are all predicated on that set of withdrawal strategy. And what we're doing when we run the base profile, which is this report, let me just run the base profile report for this couple. We're assuming that the rate of return is known that they're going to earn, which is in this case 0. You see how fast it came back. And this is a set of results based on predicated on certainty. And when we make a trajectory, we're basically running this report for this couple each year for the rest of their life, having taken a draw right on their returns, right in the year that we then run this report for. So I hope that that's clear. We're basically we are generating this trajectory of your living standard outcomes, each trajectory, and we're doing 500 of them for each investment strategy. We're doing that by running this basic certainty program each time. And it incorporates all the assumptions that are being made in your base profile about your retirement accounts. If you're specifying special withdrawals, or if you're specifying prepaying your mortgage, or if you're specifying special expenses for your kids for tuition, all that stuff is incorporated in your living standard trajectories.
Okay. A number of people are still confused about what per adult living standard really means here. For example, this is a question from Gene. If the per adult standard in the chart is, say, $45,000 for a single person, does that mean you have $22,500 per person in a two-person household? What is the right? Maybe you want to explain what's going on here and how you're calculating.
Yeah. So so it's not exactly two can live as cheaply as one. It's two can live as cheaply as 1.6. So if you had just two single adults and a single person was spending, let's say, $100,000 a year, then the married couple to have the same living standard would be spending $160,000 a year. That's so if we were trying to convert that to 160,000 into a number per person, we would divide by 1.6 in that context.
Okay. This is a question from Dina. If I'm using a 50,
there's additional adjustments for the presence of children, and the economies of shared living depend on the number of children as well. It's not that it just depends on the number of adults. And there is a formula that we specify in the FAQ part of our, if you look at the Help Center and you go to the FAQ, quite sure you're going to find a full description of the economies of shared living assumptions we're making and the exact formula. And my email address is kotlikoff@gmail.com, and if you can't find it, give a shout.
And similarly, you can email me at alex@economicsecurityplanning.com. But I really do suggest that everyone takes a look at our FAQ section, our Help Center, and you can also submit a support ticket. And my colleague Dan Royer, who's really good, will get back to you, and he's probably a better explainer of how things work than we are, maybe at this point. He's very good. This is a question from Dina. If I'm using a 50-50 base plan, why does it ask me the expected real return? Why doesn't it just use a historical returns for a 50-50 allocation?
It is using the historical returns. When we asked you what what return you want, what as if return you want to use for your spending. It's a different kind of question. It's not about your portfolio returns, but it's really about how conservative do you want to be when it comes to spending? Do you want to spend as if you're going to not do great on the market? Because most people act that way. Now, in terms of the actual mathematics of, if you go back to Bob Merton's Continuous Time Finance book, you'll find that the decision about how much, how to allocate your portfolio at any point in time, and also how much to spend at any point in time depends on that gamma coefficient, on that gamma parameter that I showed you, that Greek letter, which has to do with satiation and risk aversion. And it all comes back to that. And this is a way of trying to help people think through their degree of risk aversion when it comes to how aggressively they want to spend. So that's why we set it up this way. We could have, asked another question, just, how risk averse are you, and figured out what that meant in terms of your spending behavior. But we thought this would be a more intuitive way to do it. But it doesn't really, we are taking draws when it comes to your actual investment returns. We are taking draws from the actual historic time series of the multivariate distribution, log normal distribution of the returns of the securities that you're actually holding. And every year they can be changing, those securities, that portfolio can be changing, and there's, your retirement accounts, your spouse's, or partner's retirement accounts, your regular assets, all those. So we may be taking, if you have 3 different sets of portfolios in a given year, we'll take 3 different draws, and we'll take draws of every asset in every portfolio and pull all the information together. And then the next year, everything might be different depending on what you set up, and we'll take the draws as needed.
Right. We have 2 questions from Alan and Kevin about whether in the future, whether Maxify will be able to aggregate data from financial institutions that people may have assets in, like Schwab or
Right.
Vanguard, and I just wanted to say yes, we are working on implementing data aggregation, and hopefully get that done by the end of the year. Although it's a pretty large task.
Yeah, it might be even sooner than that. We're making great progress. This is called account aggregation. The idea that you log in, and when you come to if we come to for example, the retirement accounts for Martha, this particular number, or her $800,000 number, would be, maybe she has a Fidelity or a T. Rowe Price account. It would be right there the day that she logs in, and then we would do planning for the rest of the year as well as the future beyond that, rather than going back to plan for the entire year, because right now we're planning going back to January 1st of the current year. So we're working on that. We're working on the getting the data from the institutions into our program, and we're also separately working on making the planning just for the rest of the year. And we're making good progress on both fronts, but as Alex says, it might take might take till the end of the year, but I hope it's going to be sooner.
Okay, I wanted to ask this question from Syed. He asks, in the base strategy, the safe strategy, the risky strategy, the 1.5% return is the same, and he's wondering. He says, I assume this is not the return on stocks and bonds. Is that true or not? And then maybe you want to ask, and maybe you want to answer this question from John just as a follow-up. How are we coming up with the 1.5% return? He mentions that that Buffett thinks that that's quite low, given the way the economy is done historically.
Well, it has done much better historically. The return on U.S. wealth in general has been about 6.5% in the post-war period after inflation. If you look at kind of the national account and the Federal Reserve data on financial asset and financial wealth of the country year after year. So that's quite conservative, but we have, in terms of trying to provide the software, kind of a fiduciary responsibility to be conservative when it comes to having our default assumptions. So you can easily come back to here under settings and assumptions and change the default values, but also for this kind of informs these values for rates of return here and here and here. All these are for rates of return. They inform the as if safe return for the base strategy, but then when you're setting up the other strategies, you would specify them yourself. And here's the screen where you're just telling the program what you're going to be holding in the 3 strategies through time. But here, and I went over this too quickly, is where you set up, where you tell the program, hey, I want to spend as if I'm going to earn, in this case, 1.5% nominal on Martha's retirement assets. But you can make that 5% if you want. We just are trying to be very cautious and conservative because that's our responsibility in producing software, we feel. But you can certainly make it higher. But this is really controlling your spending behavior. It's not referring to what you're going to get on your actual investments, which are, this is determining what you're holding. You know, it's saying that, gee, you're holding 20% stocks and 80% bonds, and we're going to be taking draws. You know, if you earn 10% on the stock market in the particular draw, that means that, well, the contribution of that is 20% of 10%. That's a 2% return. That's going to be averaged with the, you know, the return 80% of the bond return to get your overall portfolio return. So for sure, we're drawing returns and referencing what your portfolio return is based on what you're actually saying you're going to be holding through time.
Yeah, and this is a question from Meg. Does our model include international stocks and bonds? And if so, what percent?
Well, you can, you know, for the assets that we have in here, we have emerging market securities. We have international core. These are DFA funds, but then there's, if you don't have access to DFA funds, there are Pacific Basin, non-U.S. equity, REITs. We talked about real estate before. So you can use these secure European stocks. So we're certainly incorporating foreign stock holdings, and again, you can add additional assets as whatever assets you like, create new assets and go to town. So yeah, everything is can be included here. Foreign, you know, we're including foreign stocks as well as domestic stocks for sure.
Let's see here. I'm just trying to find a good question.
Okay, here we've got dimensional Japan small company stocks. Okay, that's like the NASDAQ for Japan. Anyway, go ahead.
Right. Some people have asked, well, you know, don't people typically spend less as they get older? And you've got these trajectories showing, you know, high spending amounts possibly and into the future. Is there any way to sort of
oh yeah,
change
you go right
that?
here, go right to setting, go back to your base profile or whatever profile you're on, click on settings and assumption, go over to here to the living standard index, enter index values, and then this tells the program how you'd like your profile of your living standard to change through time. So the default values are 100, but let's suppose I wanted to have my, starting at 75, I wanted to have my living standard decline by negative 0.5% a year. I would, for every year thereafter, I would just hit grow. And now you see the profile is, you know, it's 100 at age 76. And by age 100, it's down to 88. So it's falling by 22%, or no, I guess 12%. You can make it fall by more. You can make it, you can have it go up for a while and then down. The program is going to match the profile that you desire, that you specify, to the extent it won't put you into debt or put you more into debt, to the extent it's not going to violate your cash flow constraint. So because we have a default assumption here that your cash flow constraint is that you can't borrow, but that's also something you can change, by the way, under I think other assumptions. You can specify how much you can borrow if you can actually borrow. But also, I think even a better way to enter, if you're, let's say, borrowing from your cousin and he's charging you 20%, so it's going to be so much dollars per year, enter that as a special expense and add the additional increase in your regular assets. He's giving you $40,000 and charging you 20% a year, and it's going to be whatever a year to pay. Enter the $40,000 as a part of your regular assets, make your regular assets larger by $40,000, and then enter a special expense, which is a repayment, and hopefully you'll be able to repay it, and he won't shoot you if you miss a payment.
Yeah. Just wanted to back up here for a second. Scott and Alan here just are making a comment, which I think is important. Scott says, it is important to point out that the Maxify default return assumptions is about spending, not directly about the market returns. Likewise, Alan says the 1.5% is the spending strategy. Maybe you want to just articulate that.
Yeah, I've tried to say, I'm probably not saying it as well as I could, but definitely the, again, we have two different sets of inputs that we ask you before we run the risk analysis. First, we ask you, tell us about these three strategies, set them up for us, tell us what you're holding, and then we asked you about your spending behavior, set up your spending behavior. And these numbers really don't connect at all directly to, to the returns you're going to be receiving on average or at random, on the actual securities you're going to be holding, because that you told us about back on the prior screen. Right here, there's a way to tell us about your spending. We could have also just asked you, are you going to be spending aggressively? Are you going to be spending conservatively? We thought this was a better way to formulate it, but it's really all about spending.
Right. We have a question from Kelly, and I'm just trying to find it, but it was a good question. She asked, what if we expect a severe COVID-related market correction like 12 months from now? How would we sort of model that in the program or input that as an expectation?
I think what I would do, you said that was from Kelly. I think, Kelly, what I would do is I go here to regular assets and lower, let's assume that this was in stocks, that they had, maybe their retirement accounts are in cash, but they had this money in stocks and they're worried about it going in half. And my view is that stock market could easily fall in half. We are having a much bigger contraction than at this point, than we've seen even in the Great Depression. So obviously there's a possibility of a vaccine. There might be rapid home tests that could get us out of the hole here. But even if that were to happen tomorrow, the fact that the economy is kind of fractured and come apart, and so many people are unemployed, and so many companies are going under or about to go under, that could have very long-term implications and could affect the market. The market dropped 53% in the Great Recession, even though output declined only about 3% at its peak, 3-4%. Here we're going to have in the second quarter output decline by 35 to 40% just in 3 months. So anyway, one thing I would do, Kelly, would be to maybe knock this number down to 200,000 and say, look, worst case scenario, it's usually the stock market doesn't drop 50% in one day. So it might drop, and you might be, if it starts to drop and you decide you need to get out, you might lose 20% by the time you get out, but not 50%. But you could set up alternative profiles, add new profile where this number is much lower. You set that to be a lower number, and then you compare your life with that happening, and you can run the same Monte. You can run the Monte Carlo for the profile where that's 200,000 rather than 400,000, and you'll get results that incorporate the fact that you've assumed, that you've got $200,000 rather than $400,000 in regular assets. So that's how I would if you think that there's something about the market that's not kind of based on history, that our time series history is picking up, that you have a sense that things are going a little bit more crazy than these days because people are investing, driving the market on the latest news about a vaccine in ways that seem to be somewhat irrational. There was a book by Robert Schiller about irrational exuberance that he's a Nobel Prize winning economist who talked about the stock market potentially not being all that rational. Well, I would say today we might have irrational exuberance going on. So anyway, let's go to the next question.
It's a question from Stephen. He says, if I, the parent, want to perform the analysis for each of our adult children, but adult children that are not living at home, sure. How would you do that? Is that done with a single instance of running Maxify, or would you have to make alternative profiles?
So Maxify, the household license is only for one household. You can run alternative profiles for that household, but what I would then recommend you do is just buy the professional version, which is so our base price for for our premium price for our price for Maxify Premium is $139, and for the professional license is $499 for the first year, and then it goes down to $379 to renew it. So I would spend the extra money, buy the professional license, and then you can set up as many relatives as you want as separate clients for 10 clients of your household. Or you could buy, if it's cheaper, you could buy a couple licenses. If it's just a couple kids, you might be cheaper just to buy them their own license.
Right. This is sort of related. It's a question from Jeffrey. Are you willing / able to recommend individual planners who use both your tool and DFA funds?
Yeah, I mean, Rick Miller's a great guy. I certainly recommend him highly. He's going to be giving the next webinar. I think our date for that, let me just see if I've got the date for Rick.
I don't know. That might actually be in August. I'm not sure. It's
been moved? Okay.
Yeah, we have to check with him again for his schedule, but that will be happening.
Yeah,
at some point.
Okay. Right, I seem to have lost our program here. Okay, here we go. So the planners, if we go to our website, let me do this on Safari so I don't have to log out. We have planners using our software, and they're listed right here. Advisors using Maxify, and just click on that, and then you'll see it's a pretty big list. We have hundreds, over 100. This is not as long as it will be, but we're trying to get a few more of these people to put up their information. But we actually have well over 100 financial planners using our software now. How many of these are DFA advisors? I don't know. I do know that Rick Miller is a DFA advisor.
Yeah.
Yep.
This is a question from Tony, which I think is good. What is the difference between the Monte Carlo analysis that Maxify runs and the Monte Carlo analyses that are run by traditional planners and retirement vendors?
Well, again, the traditional software is simulating these three kind of crazy behaviors. You're going to save and spend exactly what you're currently saving and spending as if it's correct, which I challenge anybody who's using Maxify to see whether or not their spending is what their current spending is what Maxify recommends. It's likely to be off by 10 or 20% for sure. But anyway, so it's simulating saving exactly what you're now saving, which is again not likely to be correct, and then spending at this target that you have been asked to give for post-retirement spending, which is also not likely to be correct. And then the assumption is that you're never going to adjust anything, none of your spending, none of your saving or dissaving before or after retirement, no matter what happens to the returns on your assets. So in my view, this is simulating three big mistakes. I don't know what to make of that. I don't know, why one would simulate a financial plan that involves kind of driving your car over the cliff in three different ways. I don't get it. So I don't really understand. I can't wrap my head around traditional financial planning. I don't think any real economist can do that. That's not, I'm not trying to beat up on financial planners here beyond what I'm obviously doing that, or conventional financial planning. But it was developed again at a time when we didn't have better tools, but we do now. So I don't think there's an excuse right now for people to be using. It's kind of like not using modern medicine in the context of healthcare, is the way I would put it.
Let's go back to interpreting the expected levels of utility. This is a question from Scott. He says, please provide some guidance on how to interpret the 5 utility levels. For example, what is the difference between moderate and some? Is the degree of change between the 5 values linear? How would you interpret that?
So let me just run this again. So the question was, is the difference in utility levels?
Yeah, what is the difference between them? I mean, what is the difference between moderate and some?
Moderate, okay. So,
yeah.
So literally, the risk aversion coefficient for somebody who can tolerate a lot of risk is 1. And the risk aversion coefficient for somebody who can tolerate a fair amount of risk is, I'll just go to the actual table here. Hang on one sec. So if you go back to that slide that I had where we had the definition, a mathematical definition of utility, happiness in a given year involving equaling your living standard raised to the power 1 minus gamma divided by the whole thing divided by 1 minus gamma. The gamma here is 1, the gamma here is 3, the gamma here is 5, the gamma here is 7, the gamma here is 9. So that's literally the coefficients of risk aversion go from 1 up to 9. 9 is very risk averse. 1 is very risk tolerant. Let's go to the next question, Alex.
Okay. This is a question from Lad. Any way to model a combined investments and option strategy with protective puts to minimize risk?
I think what you'd have to do is, that's a good question. I think you'd want to probably grab Excel and run, try and generate a synthetic set of returns based on, how the stock market has done historically, given how you're situated. So our software needs to take as inputs at least 10 years of returns on your particular set of securities. We don't have we don't have options, the returns on options entered here as canned assets. So we're looking to you to try and generate those return history or return projection. But you'd have to take into account the variability of those returns. So this might be a question that we should kind of think about together offline. You might want to shoot me an email and I can see if how we might help guide you in generating that series of returns that you can then enter under your own asset.
Okay, this is a little easier question. This is from Kenneth. He says, I'm 59. He's got around $200,000 in income. He's got a business maybe worth around $1 million. Is there much incentive to using Maxify at his age and where he is in his life?
Well, yeah, and it may not be so much connected to investing, although I think if you ran this risk analysis, you'll find that because your business asset may not be particularly connected to, if you specified, some stream of income as self-employment income or as a special receipt that's taxable, and then you only have a relatively small amount of financial assets, the program is going to probably say, well, you can take a little bit more risk in your financial assets because if they do poorly, you still have your business. But of course, if your business has, all businesses today are risky. There's probably no business out there that's not facing some real risk, depending on how things go. That includes Amazon. And if things get a whole lot worse, people are going to stop buying even from Amazon. So but I think the key thing that Maxify can do for you is to look at other issues, which are when should you retire? When can you afford to retire? How much would your living standard be reduced if you retire in 3 years versus 10 years? What if you downsize your home? How much could your living standard go up? What if you prepay your mortgage? Should you do a Roth conversion, maybe now or at the point where you retire? When should you start withdrawing your retirement account money? When should you stop? When should you start taking Social Security? Because the program has Social Security optimization. As you can click this maximization report, and it will robo-optimize over Social Security. And then things like, should I move to Florida where they have a lot of virus but very low taxes? Or should I move in with my kids maybe? There's lots of issues, but the key thing that the tool is going to do for you is give you an idea of how much you should be spending between now and the end of your days. And you have to plan potentially to live to a very ripe old age, because you might. So our planning horizon is the default value is age 100. But so again, the key thing is giving you a plan that you can update periodically. Some people run our program every week, or some people even every day. And as we get this account aggregation going, people may be running it more often. But yeah, I think this thing is extremely valuable, even independent of this entire risk analysis we've been talking about today. It's just the potential for safely raising your living standard dramatically by running our software is really something very unique. And anyway, I'll go to the next question.
Yeah, so this is a question from Philip, and it's a good question. So after you run the risk analysis, what do you do then? Do you go back and modify the base plan with the information, or how do you incorporate this into your actual plan?
Well, you can set up alternative profiles with where you're investing. Each time you set up an alternative profile, you can set up different investment strategies, and then you can compare one profile with another. So you can compare the utility from investing in this set of securities with this set of versus this set of securities. So that's so just like exploring downsizing your home, you might want to set up several different portfolios profiles where you might think about moving to North Carolina if you're living in New York versus maybe living in Wyoming versus, how much is your living standard going to be different if you do those two different things, and then you make a decision. Well, here you have to make a decision about what kind of securities to be holding, and this thing can help you do that. And this expected utility chart can give you some guidance in that direction in figuring out what to do. So that'd be my answer, that the program can help you figure out just kind of a base plan for maintaining your living standard, not taking any risk, then how to maximize your living standard safely without taking any portfolio and financial risk, and then how to deal with financial risk if you want to take on the financial risk. How much financial risk do you want to take on? How do you want to invest? How much can you absorb of that? How much financial risk can you absorb? What's your downside? How big is this downside that you have to worry about? Can you handle it? That kind of thing.
Right. This is a question from Kathleen. Do the Monte Carlo simulations assume the portfolio is rebalanced periodically, maybe every year?
The Monte Carlo simulations do assume that if you're telling the program that you're holding 50% stock, it assumes that you're holding 50% stock. Let's say you say you're always going to hold 50% stock. Well, it assumes you're always holding 50% stock in your portfolio. So it does assume a rebalancing. Yeah.
This is a question from Samuel. If I run the Monte Carlo in year 1, and then in year 2, my balances have reflected market changes, do I discard the spending projection from year 1 and adopt the new year 2 number?
Yes, you do, because year 1 is no longer relevant. It's past. It's just history. You have to base your decisions today on what's going on today. And so if you had, last year's return might have been high and this year's might have been really low, but you have to take into account exactly where you are in terms of where your assets are. So yes.
Right. This is a question from Jennifer. Is there a way for us to override the tax assumptions? For example, I have a scenario where I move to a different country. I need to adjust the taxes. I know that I could use a no income tax state, but I need to adjust the federal or employment income overseas using the exemption or tax treaty. So is there any way to kind of adjust for taxes?
Well, yeah, I guess one thing to do is there are different ways to do this. One is you could let the program calculate your federal taxes, enter a special receipt for any foreign tax credit you think you're going to be getting. So like you'd enter it as a non-taxable special receipt, or you could come here and you could tell the program under settings and assumptions, you go to taxes, you go to changes in tax policy. You could say that you expect like a 100% decline in taxes. Is basically turning off taxes starting in 2020. It's going to turn off federal income tax. You could turn off FICA taxes. You could turn off state income taxes. And then the program will assume that there's no U.S. taxation. And then you could enter as a special receipt, a special expense, the taxes that you expect to pay in the foreign country. But if you're maintaining your U.S. citizenship, then it's going to get a little bit more complicated because you're going to have U.S. taxes, foreign tax credit, and then foreign taxes to pay. So you can certainly get a pretty good handle. I wish the program could had all the, was advanced to the point where we had a version of this for China, for India, for living in Russia, for living in Italy and Germany, but we'd have to have the tax and benefit codes for all those countries, which would be quite an undertaking. It would take a small army of software engineers to put that together. And if we had that, we would be all set up to help you really quickly deal with thinking about moving, but we're not now. So it's going to be somewhat crude, but there are kind of workarounds that will get you pretty close.
Okay, there's a number of people have asked whether you can simulate a reverse mortgage and how you would do that in the program. You want to maybe speak on that?
Yeah, I think we have an FAQ on that, and so basically, just really briefly, and we may set this up at some point to make it more automated, just like we've automated Roth conversions and prepaying mortgages. So roughly, my understanding is that a reverse mortgage is basically like giving you some money up front that you never have to repay if you end up staying in your home. And you may, it's like, you're borrowing money, but then it's like you don't have to repay it if there's no payment schedule. You just don't have to repay it until when you die, the house is what's ever owed at that point, which is what you borrowed, accumulated up at a pretty high interest rate, is going to be that amount's going to be taken from the value of your house, and a smaller amount or even nothing may go to any heirs or any kids, whatever. But you also have to look at the possibility of having to move, and when you have to move with a reverse mortgage, then you have to repay. So suppose you borrow $100,000 on your house and in a reverse mortgage, and you have to pay 6% interest, and it's accumulating, and in 10 years you have to move because your child needs you to be babysitting the kids there, or you want to be near your child, or maybe you need to move into a nursing home or something. Well, I would set these things up as alternative scenarios, alternative profiles, and at that point, this borrowing has to be repaid. So you have more regular assets right now, but then there's this special expense coming 10 years from now. So you have to enter more regular assets, but also a one-time special expense 10 years from now, equaling the amount of repayment that you have to make. And then you get to see, gee, this is quite risky in some respects. The reverse mortgage is just great if I live for a long time and I get to stay in my house, but if I have to move, there's going to be some chance that happens, I'm going to get nailed. So that's the way I would try and look at reverse mortgages in our software.
Right. Okay, we still have a number of questions here. I don't know how long you want to keep going here, but
let's go for how many questions you have, and how many people are left on the horn here?
We have about 400 people still here with us, and I salute everyone for staying on. I know we have a myriad of questions. Yeah.
Yes. Sure. Well, let's keep at it for another 15 minutes, and then we'll call it quits, huh?
Okay, sounds good. So this is a question from Terrence. Back to the spending level factor that you set. How do we decide what number correlates to our planned spending? In effect, what does 1.5% represent for spending?
Well, you'll get to see what the spending trajectories look like, and where for example the median spending is relative to. So I think that's, and I'll just run this one more time. It's going to take a bit. So your spending is not going to, because you're taking on risk, your spending is not going to be as it is when you're running the other reports, for sure. because those reports assume that you're investing in effect in inflation index bonds that are paying a perfectly safe return. So here, we're talking about lots of places your spending could end up, and you just have to see whether you're happy with that. You know, you might decide, hey, I don't really want to have that much risk. I don't want this much variability. Let's look at it. I mean, for Martha and Sam, that's a pretty big swing. I mean, at the end, we're talking about 320,000 for the 95th percentile versus 52,000 for the 5th percentile. Maybe they want to, when they look at this, they might want to set up an alternative profile where they take some of their assets, the retirement account assets, for example, and put them into an annuity that would pay them a fixed payment. Now, the risk there has to do with inflation. It used to, up to a couple months ago, the principal life insurance company was selling inflation indexed annuities, and but that's no longer the case. So there's inflation risk, and we're going to incorporate inflation risk in these Monte Carlo simulations in the near term. It's very high on my agenda to do that. But so there are, you know, ways to try and mitigate this risk. Annuitization has some advantages in that context, but also some disadvantages. But then just diversifying, holding safer assets, a bigger share in safer assets. So if you look at this and you're okay with this downside and you're happy about the upside, well, maybe this portfolio is for you. But if you think, gee, I don't want my living standard to be at 47,000 when, you know, a few years before it was at 65,000. I don't want it to see a drop like that. And that's not the worst case scenario. That's just the 5th percentile curve. So then this may not be your preferred portfolio. You may prefer to have a safer portfolio. This again is the base strategy, the 50-50 stocks bonds. You may want to go 20-80 stocks bonds, or even 10-90. So it's really a personal thing, but you have to see what could happen to you. That's what we're trying to provide, a picture.
Right. And this is related to that. This is a question from MR. He asked, how can I compare the software's projected discretionary spending to my current living standard? In other words, how do I actually, keep track of how I'm doing compared to what the program is recommending? Maybe you want to talk about the progress tracker.
Yeah, if you go back to, let's just go back to running the base report. I'm just going to run that here. And when we first started working on this software, what I just ran in half a second would have taken about 6 hours. Just to be clear, it's amazing every time it runs that fast, because I recall thinking we'd never be able to get it to work that quickly. But anyway, after you've run the program, and there's all kinds of results to look at, like, their living standard, what that is, and the income and so forth. But once you've run the program and taken a look at the results, you can come over here and set up your progress tracker. And this is, first of all, just summarizing what your income is for 2020, and then what the fixed spending and how much the household should be saving, how much they are saving through retirement accounts, and how much in addition they should save. And then you can then figure out how to budget. So if you budgeted from scratch, for example, you'd say, okay, you have this much money to spend, and then add a budget category like, food, okay? And maybe you're spending 12,000 a year on food. And you can see that now you've got 48,739 left to spend. So by adding these amounts, and then you add another category and another category, you can, by adding up what you actually are spending, you can then quickly compare it with this mechanism with what we're recommending and make adjustments. So that's the progress tracking to see whether you're on the right path to not overspend what is an annual budget. So you've got a kind of a lifetime budget, how much you can spend over your lifetime, but also every year so that you can have the same living standard to the extent that your cash flow constraints allow into the future.
Right. Let me ask, Kelly asked another question, just back to the per adult living standard, which I think folks are still kind of struggling to understand here. She asked, so the numbers we are looking at now, which are the per adult living standard, to know how much you can discretionarily spend in a two-person adult household, do you multiply that number by 1.6?
Oh, let me just go back here and run this really quickly again. I'll show you. We tell you how much your total discretionary spending should be, and then we convert it into your per adult living standard. So if you look here, this chart is actually of your discretionary spending. That's what the orange line is. So that's the actual dollar amount in today's dollars you should be spending this year. The fixed spending is like for taxes and mortgage payments and homeowners insurance. And the green is like your income, your asset income, your labor income, self-employment, business income. But if you want to see this this discretionary spending converted into living standard per household member, it's right here. And here you can see the direct comparison. The blue curve at the top is the discretionary spending, which is fixed at 60,000 or so a year, and the living standard is about 40,000. So
right, but the trajectories are per adult living standard as well.
Say again?
But the trajectories are per adult living standard now.
Yeah, the trajectory are for adult, yeah. And then if you wanted to ask about the total spending, you'd have to multiply by a factor that would get you back to discretionary spending. And
you would multiply it by 1.6 now.
It depends on how many people are in the household, but yeah, 1.6 is the right number if it's just two people.
Okay. Yes, that answers her question. There was a question, let me just see. Oh yeah, from Stephen here. When you're say if there is a COVID drop in the market, why simulate the COVID drop via regular assets? Shouldn't the retirement assets drop instead? Are we factoring that in for a market drop in terms of retirement assets?
Because when you set up your when you run this risk analysis report, we're asking you to tell us about your regular assets, how they're allocated, but also your retirement account assets. So we're certainly taking draws of the returns on your retirement account assets, as well as draws on your returns on your risky assets. So it's all incorporated.
Okay, good. This is a question from Scott. Suppose we want to see the percentiles of living standard in a given year rather than the percentiles of the average living standard over time. These are not necessarily the same. Is there a way to see the former?
Yeah, let me run this again. I'll show you the other pictures that we have here that get at that. Just take a sec. Maybe you want to ask another question while this is chugging, and I'll come back.
Sure. Yes. Let me.
Or maybe it's going to go quick. It seems maybe it's gone pretty quick here.
Just trying to find a good question too.
A lot of people have gone home for the day or whatever, or gone to the bedroom or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, okay, that was quick. So let's, who asked the question, Alex?
Oh, I think it was, might have been Scott. I'm not sure, actually. I'll find out.
Okay, so Scott,
moving through many questions. Yeah.
This is the the green, for example, is one particular trajectory with the 95th highest average living standard across all these years. But you're asking a different question, which is this one, which is if you look at a given year, kind of what's the 95th highest level of per adult living standard in that particular year, and that's the top of this light gray. That's way up here, which is $188,000. So this picture is doing exactly what you're focused on, which is the cross section in a given year. And then this picture is doing collapsing all those years into one picture, saying, okay, look, this couple's got about 45 years left to go, and there's 5,000 observations. So how many is that? That's whatever, 2,200, I guess. I think I've said different numbers incorrectly today on this call, but it's several thousand. Anyway, all several thousand of those living standards are collected together, and we're showing, gee, if we just don't care about what year they arise, but just say, how big are they, and what's their range? Well, the median is right here, which is about 64,000, and then the 95th highest value is up here at 185, and the fifth lowest value is down here at 37.9 thousand. So this, the prior picture was looking at a point in time at a given year, and this is looking across all years and all trajectories in one diagram.
Right. Can you show, this is a question from Chandler, can you show setting up a mix of assets such as 30% cash, 20% fixed income, 10% real estate, 40% stocks on large caps with dividends? Is that something that you can show, or?
Yeah, let me just set up a new strategy. And so that was just copying over the strategy we had, which is the base strategy. And then if I run the report, I come in here, and the new strategy is going to, let's see, so I can choose a different investment strategy. It could be all bonds, for example. And there it is. So, and then you say, well, how do you set up the all bonds strategy? Well, you go right here and you look at all bonds and see what it is. And it's 100% this bond index. And if you wanted to modify it, you could edit it, but you could also set up other assets as you'd like. So it's quite simple. Just kind of play around with it. And I think, within a minute or two, you'll figure out everything you can do with it. Just keep clicking on things.
Right. There's lots to explore in the program, and lots to model. This is an earlier question from Bruce. She asked, what assumptions are being used for medical cost inflation, tax policy, and so you cap for current SALT limitations in high tax states?
Yeah, we certainly, we're doing state by state tax calculations for the 42 states, including DC, that have state taxes. And we certainly incorporate the 2017 tax reform, the Tax Cut and Job Act, which includes the SALT limitation. That's and also the mortgage issues, and we're dealing with alimony, I think, correctly as well. All those provisions that some of which were grandfathered, some not. And now I've lost track of the question. So I know SALT was in there. What else was in this question?
Oh, like future medical costs and
I would enter those
Medicare
under,
policy.
Yeah, I would go. Let's go back to the base profile. I would. Well, first of all, under Medicare policy, the issue there, the big issue is whether Medicare Part B premiums are going to grow at a faster rate than the 3% default that we are assuming here. So you could specify a higher growth rate, or you could go under housing here and, under household and enter a special expense, which would, this could be medical, okay? It could be medical, and it could be not tax related, and it could be $100,000 a year. So I'm planning on thinking about spending time in a nursing home, possibly in 20 years, and maybe it's going to end in 20. Maybe I'm thinking about a 6-year experience in the nursing home. And now you would save it down here, and then you could enter another expense. So any medical expenses that might come up, you would enter here. Again, the Medicare increase in premiums, you would specify under settings and assumptions. But you could also, if you thought it was just going to be like a one-time increase in, maybe it wasn't going to be an annual higher growth rate, but it was just going to be that the Medicare premium went up and stayed up for the rest of, eternity, and it's going to cost you an extra $2,000 a year. You could just enter that as a special expense starting in a given year, $2,000 more in today's dollars or in nominal dollars, depending on what you thought was going to happen. So that's how I would deal with this. And through time, we will provide in the program more guidance with respect to out-of-pocket medical expenses. That's also on our drawing board.
Right. That was answering someone else's question, which is they need some guidance in estimating, future medical expenses. This is just a basic question from Sarah, but it's a good one. It's just, how many alternative profiles can I create?
I don't think we have a limit, so I don't think we specified any limit. So I think the sky is the limit at this point. Unless I don't know the right answer, I can check with our CTO, but I believe there's no limit. So Alex, it's now around 4:15. Why don't we take another 2 questions and then give people a break?
Yeah, let's take 2 more questions here.
How many brave souls? How many brave souls do we have left?
We have about 300 brave souls still with us, which is very impressive.
That is impressive.
Hats off to you guys.
Thank you all for sticking with it.
Yeah. This is a question that's come up a couple times. It's from Renee. How does one record life / term policies in Maxify? These are policies I already own, not the calculated recommendation that Maxify produces. So how do you input life term policies in Maxify that you already have?
Yeah, well, that's also on our drawing board to let people enter what they currently hold in. We're going to be reconfiguring how you enter your assets and to make it a little slicker and easier for people. And one of the assets would be your life insurance policies, some of which might be universal or whole life policies. And you might have some cash value and some term value well, you have term value, but also cash value. So we'll be asking those questions, and then we'll be able to compare what you're actually holding with what we're recommending in terms of at least the term value of the policy versus the term value that we think you need. So we're still kind of working on that. In the short run, what I would do is if you have a policy that has a cash value, I would add that to your regular assets, because that's like having money in a checking account. So I would just incorporate that as part of your regular assets. If you have 100,000 and $200,000 in checking accounts, make your regular assets equal to 300,000. Handle it that way. And then, since you know the term value of your policy, then just compare it with what our recommendation is, because our recommendations about life insurance are all about the term value, and it's all in today's dollars for each year going forward.
Right. So this is our last question, and I'll just make it a two-part question. It's from Nikolai, because he asked two questions here. One is this software useful for the average Joe? And the second part is, has the model, and I think he's referring maybe just to the regular consumption smoothing model, but also with regard to the risk analysis, the Monte Carlo model of the software, has that been tested against actual data?
Okay, let me start with the second part of the question, which is we're using actual historic return data. For example, we have data going back to 1929 on the S&P return on stocks, and we have data from Morgan Stanley on bond returns. So we're using as much historic data as is out there as far back as possible. So we're definitely, I wouldn't say, the question is not really tested. I think the question should be, are you actually using real world data? And the answer is definitely yes. In terms of testing whether or not the program is working, it may seem like to a newcomer that this is a black box. And when you run, for example, the base plan, which is not incorporating any risk for right now, is the thing working? Well, the lifetime balance sheet is balanced. It's lifetime income and lifetime spending are within, in this case, $2 of each other. And if you look at how the household's regular assets evolve, they end up dying broke with exactly $0 when they reach 100 at the very end. So none of that, and then we wouldn't be able to have, in this case, apart from the borrowing constraint issue, the cash constraint issue, we wouldn't be able to have constant discretionary spending in today's dollars unless that's also something the program is supposed to generate, and it is constant. So you can see with your eyeball that the program is doing what it advertises it's doing, that it's getting the right answer. And then is it for the average Joe? Well, I would say it is for the average Joe, because I'm kind of like the average Joe when it comes to thinking about these things too. I mean, I have to ask, how much should I be spending, and how much should I be saving? And what I'd like to do is, I know what my labor income is. I have an idea about my future labor income. I can check my Social Security earnings record and plug it in. Or if I know my benefit, I might be able to just put my full retirement benefit in. I know my retirement account values. I know it for my spouse. I know our mortgage. I know how many kids I've got and their ages. And that's not a lot of inputs. That's any average Joe should be able to come up with those numbers, and they can. And then that's it. We don't ask you how much you're spending on toilet paper this month. We're not asking you to start collecting lots of information, which I think about your current spending, because the current spending is likely not to be correct, almost surely. So why should we spend a lot of time getting the an exactly correct number for something that's not going to be the right thing to be spending to begin with. So once you've entered this basic information, you hit, run the report, and then bingo, it says what to do, which in this case would be, it's saying, here's how much you need to be saving, 47,803 in their case. Here's how much you should be spending. And of that 202,000, the discretionary part, coming back to here, was is 60,000. So this is like your spending money. So this is telling you right away, here's what you need to do in terms of spending. You've got this fixed spending that's off the top. You have to do it for taxes and mortgage payments and so forth. Here's your pocket money. Here's your, divide that by 12. Now you have a monthly budget. And what about life insurance? Well, you guys need some life insurance. It's this amount, and here's the likely premium. And so right away, it's giving you recommendations about saving, spending, and life insurance. And then there's more details. You can kind of drill down and see things like your taxes and the federal tax detail, for example, or your, if you want to look at your retirement accounts, see those, or your Social Security benefits, you can look at those. So yeah, I think this is definitely for the average Joe, because it's not, it's very simple. The inputs are straightforward, and we ask them in a kind of wizard type style. We don't ask you everything in one moment. We walk you through the program very slowly on the input side. And then the results, I think, are pretty straightforward. And then there's lots of videos and case studies and, columns I've written under articles if you go to the website. So lots of help. And then we have a whole help center and a glossary. So, and then we're here to help. If you have any questions, just shoot us an email or go enter a support ticket. So yeah, I'm convinced this is, we built this for the average Joe, and it's definitely being used by thousands of average Joes for sure. So let me stop there and say how much I appreciate everybody hanging with us this long. It's 2.5 hours, and that's our record, I guess. And it's been a pleasure talking with you. I really appreciate the support of our company and the software, and do continue to help spread the word about us and the company, and we'll keep improving the software, and more webinars are coming your way. So keep coming back. Thanks so much. And thank you, Alex.
Thank you so much. Yep. Thank you, everyone.